Hey everyone, my name is Dr. Dolores Tarver. I'm a licensed psychologist here in Georgia, and it is time for the TT Time with Dr. Tarver. Is a wellness-based podcast. It is not intended to be a substitute for a relationship with a licensed mental health provider. Welcome to December. I hope you had a wonderful week last week in whatever you did to celebrate for Thanksgiving, whether that was you getting just some needed rest or you spending time with friends and family. Hopefully, you were able to utilize some of the things we talked about during the month of November as we embarked upon this Hope for the Humanity series. And so maybe you played some games, shared a kind word, expressed some joy, did some arts and crafts, listened to some music, did some karaoke, got your dance on. But hopefully, it was a well needed respite for you, and you got a chance to do joyful things with wonderful people and eat some good deliciousness while you were at it. So I am just really excited and happy today. And of course, I'm going to share. So I was at a storage facility earlier getting some things ready for an event coming up on Friday. And I got to the door, had the flatbed dolly. I'm sure it probably has a name, but that's what I'm calling it, a flatbed dolly. And I was coming out the doors and propping the doors open and all this good stuff. And this lovely lady, I had never seen her before. She, beautiful woman, gray hair, just beautiful spirit, gets out of her car and she says, "May I help? You look like you could use some help." And I was taken aback. One, because I'm thinking, like, wow, you don't even know me. Two, like, you probably were up here attending to whatever you got in stores, and then you're going to extend an offer to assist me. And I was like, yes, ma'am, please, and thank you. I said, my mother always used to say, sometimes you need a little hope. And she started laughing. She said, "Well, that happens to be my name." I said, "Your name is Hope?" She said, "It is." I said, "Look at God, won't He do it?" And she got tickled. She started laughing. She said she's from a military family, so they're used to moving things around. And when I tell you all, this woman helped me organize this car and get the stuff together. And she wasn't pushy or bossy or anything. Like, it just was. It's very kind and empathic and compassionate gesture, just really sweet. So we got done putting everything in the car, and I said, "Let me tell you, you have truly been a blessing. I appreciate you, Miss Hope." And she waved and went on about her way. So this episode is dedicated to Hope. And though I was going to actually talk about hope today, because it would have been fitting, instead today I'm going to talk about one of my other favorite words, which is compassion. So I know you all are thinking, like, okay, now we go from hope to compassion. Well, I will tell you. Compassion is an action word, and I know we talk a lot about empathy and understanding. Compassion is a little different because compassion embodies that I don't necessarily have to understand everything that you're feeling. I don't have to agree with it. I don't even have to recognize it. But what I can recognize is when you are in a position where you may be able to benefit from some assistance. Compassion is being able to look at someone and see their need. Now, that could be a need for you to talk to them, talk them through things. Sometimes I have seen perfect strangers walk up to someone on a bench or standing against a wall and they say, "You look a little heavy, everything okay?" And I remember seeing a woman do this to no, it was a man did it to a woman. We were all walking, hustle and bustle, walking down the sidewalk. He passed by her, he stopped, and something must have touched him. He turned back around and he said, "Sis, whatever it is that you're going through, do know that it's temporary, it will pass, and you're going to be all right." And she looked up and she said, "You don't know how much I needed to hear that." And he went on about his way. That, friends, is compassion. The act of being able to get out of our own heads. We have so much going on at any given time. I know that you all just got finished with Thanksgiving. I know that might have not been the greatest experience for everyone. I hope you were able to find some joyful moments in it. I do know the holidays can be very stressful for people, especially if you're having people come to your house and I know a lot of us deal with these wounds we have, or we feel like we have to be perfectionists and everything has to be great. And we have some people who kind of pick at those wounds and make us feel as if we're not good enough or that we're too much. And it can be really challenging to try to have conversations with people. And it's the holidays, so you're trying to keep the peace and don't want to start a lot of confusion, and your mama is telling you, now y'all get along now. The only thing I want is to have a peaceful holiday. And you know that's the worst thing you can tell somebody that's dealing with some shame issues is the only thing I want, right? Because what are we gonna do? Feel responsible for making sure that happens. So I know for a lot of you, there are things that are going on underneath the surface at any given point, and it can be very challenging to pay attention to anything other than whatever heaviness you may have on you that you're trying to navigate through yourself. But when we can step outside of ourselves and be able to see someone else, some of y'all doing it too much and not taking care of yourselves, that's the conversation for another day. But when you're able to see someone else as you're going along and do an act. And again, it doesn't have to be a grand gesture like this. First of all, this woman put me to shame how she lifted these tables about this flatbed like they didn't weigh but 2 pounds. But anyway, but it doesn't have to be a grand gesture like that in order for it to be a compassionate act. Compassion can look like a lot of different things, much like the brother who stopped the sister and said, "Hey, whatever you going through, sis." Right? It can be that kind word, but it can also be something like I've talked about this before. I know it in at least one of my podcast episodes how much I used to appreciate when I had a child in a stroller, but also as I've seen other people with strollers. You all know navigating airports when you got babies is its own special challenge, and so being able to have people who would just pick up that stroller for me to make sure that we could get down the escalator when there wasn't an elevator option, or who would hold something to ensure that I got in and got seated. I've had people say, "Let me put this stuff up for you. You just sit down. I'll hand them to you." Just very kind gestures like that, right? Compassion. Being able to recognize, like, this woman is traveling, and my child was breastfed baby. So that joker, it, cried all the time unless he was breastfeeding. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. So it was a challenge to travel because, again, airplanes, airports, a lot of sounds, I'm sure overstimulating for an infant. And so being able to breastfeed was also a way to for him to get soothed. He's like, whatever this is, I don't like any of it. So I need some normalcy around here, what we got going on. And so he would be crying, and I could just look in people's faces, and they would be so, because sometimes people can be real cruel, especially when you're trying to navigate getting yourself situated on a plane, and people are like, "Oh, you got a flight with this crying baby." And people would help me out. Is there anything else I can do? I say, as soon as I can get over in this seatbelt, we're gonna be just fine. Get in the seatbelt, get settled, start breastfeeding them out like a light every time without fail. And they would say, just shake their heads like, "We got you, mama." So I always appreciated that. What is that? An active example of compassion. And so there are a lot of ways that you can show up for people in terms of being compassionate. And I don't want compassion to be confused with you all overgiving. I know this is a time of year where people again feel overly responsible for folks. And so you giving to every charity, every organization, everybody in your family that needs an extra bit to get to the family cruise. That is not what I'm saying here, right? Because compassion doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to do anything that depletes you, right? Compassion is an extension of something you're already able to give that does not hurt you. It is a reflection of just simply being present. Sometimes I have seen people just put a hand on someone's shoulder, like, "Hey, you're not here by yourself." I have seen people stop when they see kids unsupervised just by themselves, looking a little uncomfortable, like, "Hey, where's your people at? You here by yourself?" "No, ma'am, I'm lost. I can't find them." Right? And so, okay, well, hold on. What do they have on? Where's the last place? That is an example of compassion. I've also seen people, I love it when y'all help somebody put their groceries in their car or hold a door open. An example of compassion. You see again, people struggling, trying to get through. I saw an older lady. You all know Publix is one of my favorite stores. I saw an older lady at Publix, and you know how sometimes you just get winded or you may get a little dizzy, and you just need to sit. Well, there's not always necessarily a place to do that, especially if you're in a parking lot. So she was coming out of the store. And imagine she had already shopped and done some things, or maybe she was in there with someone else and kind of came out. Maybe she wasn't feeling real well, get her a little air. But then, you know, when it hits you, you gotta sit. So I saw her look like almost like she stumbled. So I went back. Then I saw that she was sitting on, you know, when you park the little raised piece. Clearly, I can't find my words today, but you all know what I'm talking about. The little yellow raised thing that stops you from running into your neighbor in the next spot in front of you. And then I just stood back and watched her because I also know that sometimes people are very prideful with regard to receiving assistance. And this was an older lady, and I also didn't want to make her uncomfortable. And so I just stood back and just kind of watched. And then eventually her people came from out of the store. Um, and what had happened was she had gotten a little dizzy and needed to sit, and she was on her way actually out to the car, but she couldn't quite make it to the car, which is why she sat there on that little raised parking bumper. And so when her people came out, they just brought the car up, and they helped her get into the car, right? And so sometimes compassion is about, like, I'm just going to keep a watchful eye on you to make sure you're okay. And had she needed some assistance, I would have been there to intervene. But sometimes you just kind of sit back and watch folks. You don't necessarily have to intervene. I've also seen people just assist when they see that somebody hasn't shown up. So you all have been at a program. People say they're going to come, they're going to help out, and then they don't show up, they flake out. And so I've seen people walk up, and I've done this myself too, seen people walk up and say, how can I help? Right? And let me tell you why that matters in this compassionate journey that we're all on as human beings. When you ask, how can I help, instead of what do you need, right? Because if you say, what do you need, people will say, I don't know. How can I help? Oh, um, like there's all this stuff. No problem. Because all we really need is your permission. Tablecloths, no problem. Right. And so, and it also stops people from giving you a yes or no answer. Right. Because our automatic, again, is like, no, I don't want you to do anything. You're a guest, or maybe you're somebody that's here for whatever this program is going to be, and I don't want to put you out, right? But if you ask, how can I help? It takes that option away from me, because you can't say, how can I help? No. Right? How can I help? The people pause. And as they pause, that might also be an opportunity for you to be able to say, so I saw that these things are still on the table. Can I bag them up? And I've also seen people say, what are the things that are left to get done? I brought some people with me. What kind of manpower do you need? Because sometimes you need like people to lift stuff, right? And we all have our limitations. So again, you being compassionate doesn't mean that you're putting yourself in harm's way. So you don't need to be lifting stuff. You got back problems and knee problems and neck problems and all that stuff. One of my good friends, her tire was flat. So she had ended up hitting a curb. We had been at dinner the night before, and I know y'all like to tease us women about that a curb hate to see us coming. They do. But anyway, she was looking at just a beautiful house that caught her by surprise, and just wasn't aware of how close she was to the curb. Ended up running on the curb. Car was fine at dinner, but that next day, so you all know how those slow leaks are. By the time she got to church, it was flat, flat, flat. So some of the guys out in the parking lot said like, "Hey, your tire is flat," and she was like, "Oh yeah, I hit a curb last night and must have a slow leak in it." So we're problem solving, trying to figure out who can assist her. And so she called there, some people recommended the person. She called this person. They said, look, I will help you in any way I can, but I can't do any heavy lifting and actually change your tire because I recently had surgery. So that I don't even have that kind of mobility. So Sometimes when you get a no, it can throw you off, right? And cause you to feel like, well, maybe I don't need to ask anymore. I don't want to be a bother. I don't want to be a burden to anyone. And I simply said to her, hey, you have other options. She said, you're right. You're right. So thought a little more, asked someone. He said, absolutely. And I actually have an ear jack, so I can get you switched out in 2 seconds. That didn't end up working because his ear jack couldn't get under her car because her car was so low. Nonetheless, it got changed, right? But that compassion piece makes the difference of being able, even if you're not the person that can address it, even if you help and offer some other names or say, well, I won't be able to, but maybe this other person will be able to, or you help someone problem solve and figure it out. That's an act of compassion as well. That act of engagingly doing something to be able to recognize, like, hey, this person needs some assistance. And again, that being able to see people is an important tool in us being just better human beings, being able to connect with people, being able to have meaningful interactions, being able to nurture relationships with people, being able to listen when somebody's going through a tough challenge, being able to support people, show up for people, being able to recognize, like, hey, this person maybe doesn't have people that can come to this event. Maybe they don't have family in the area. Maybe they don't have people who are capable of getting out. Maybe they have, older people in their lives who want to come out and support them but can't. And you show up and they see your face there, right? And that they didn't ask you to come. You didn't even tell them that you were going to come, but you thought to yourself, I don't want this person to have to end up being there by themselves. You all may remember the movie Up. I like a good Disney Pixar movie, where we have this young male who is in his scout troop, and his father is not around. And so, who shows up for his pinning ceremony but his new friend that he made during this journey, right? And again, it does not matter what that looks like. That can look like this gentleman, was an older man, but he was present, right? And so sometimes we think that we're not able to do stuff because of age or ability or vision, but there are so many ways that you can show up for people if you get out of your head thinking like, oh, I'm not good enough. Right, like I'm not going to be able to be the person to assist in this way. And that is different than a boundary. I want to be clear about that, because sometimes we do need to have the boundaries around what I'm able to do, because again, compassion shouldn't take anything away from you. It shouldn't hurt you. It shouldn't put you in a position where you're not going to have the resources you need. But sometimes we're just questioning whether or not we're the right one for the job. And the answer is yeah, absolutely. Show up. Showing up for people is an act of compassion. I do also want to say that compassion serves us in a lot of different ways, right? Compassion allows us to be able, when someone is going through something, and again, it can be difficult for people to ask for help, right? And so that compassion, I will never forget. My mother had, and moms probably do, I guess, to some extent, have that capacity of knowing when your kids need something, even if they don't say anything. And so when I was a college student, you all know how it is when you're a college student, especially in the 90s, like you struggling out there. Most of the times you got some little job at a retail store, a fast food place, if you're able to work at all, depending on what you got going on or work study. So not a lot of income coming in, and you're trying to make sure you have enough to be able to eat. And my mother, without a doubt, would send me a care package or send me a check. And she would always say, I know you don't have any money. And I just would laugh, like, how you don't have any money? But I always appreciated that. And whenever I would come home, you know how parents do, right? So they're going to load you up on all your groceries before you head back. And so I've always appreciated that she never made me have to ask for it or feel like I was a burden, because I think sometimes why people struggle to ask for help is because they feel like, one, people aren't going to give it to them because unfortunately they've had some of those experiences, but two, it feels like they are, depleting or taking away from or causing harm to someone that they love and care about, and they don't want to do that. And so sometimes when we show up for them without them having to ask, that allows them to recognize, like, no, this isn't a strain. I'm doing it because I choose to, and I'm doing it because I can. So, how do we grow more in compassion? Paying attention is a huge part of that. Being able to actively listen. I think a lot of times we want to kind of jump in quickly and help people problem solve, but sometimes we just really need to listen and see and hear the things that they're not saying and doing. Right. So if you're with a person in person, then there's a lot of things you can pick up from their body language. You can pick up from their tone. You can pick up from their eye contact. You can pick up from their subtle gestures that tell us when people are uncomfortable, or maybe they feel ashamed of something, or maybe they want to ask something but they're not quite sure how to do that, or if they can do that. When you listen, you pick up on those things, and it allows us to be able to sharpen our listening skills, and be able to truly hear people, and so then they feel safe being able to share with us, right? That's part of compassion as well, creating these safe spaces for people to be able to be who they are without feeling like they're going to be judged or thought of as less than if they need some assistance. I also think volunteering really helps us with compassion. Sometimes we are, again, so caught up in everything we have going on, we forget about the other things that are out there that people are dealing with that are difficult for them as well. And then I'm not getting into that comparison game. We don't do that. Like, your bad is not worse than my bad. But recognizing that there are different things that people struggle with. And I think one of the reasons why some people struggle to have compassion is because they don't have any other access to people outside of folks who are dealing with stuff that's similar to them. So if you're not in a position where you've had to struggle to find affordable, clean, safe housing, then it may be difficult for you to have compassion for someone that is in that place. And it can be easy for us to be judgmental when we haven't been exposed to all of the different types of things that are out there. That, I shared a few weeks or so ago about some people in my hometown who posted a very derogatory video of a woman who was experiencing a psychotic episode. And even when her family reached out, they refused to take it down, and they're mocking. Um, Sometimes we think that people put themselves in situations such as having mental illness, such as being homeless, such as having substance abuse problems. It can be very difficult for us to recognize the illness that's underneath the issues of access and equitability that interfere with some people being able to get what they need. And so, because we're in those places of privilege sometimes and we're a little bit removed, then what are we doing? We're making up a scenario, drawing conclusions that may not even be accurate to what that person is experiencing. So volunteering allows us to be able to challenge some of those biases that we may have, and better be able, again, to hear and understand what somebody else may be experiencing. And even if I don't understand it, I still recognize that there are ways that I can help and support people, even if that's not my experience. I think just building our awareness around our thoughts and feelings, so linking back to the biases, we all have them. We grew up in environments that shaped us. It may be a bias about certain people that live in certain areas, or have a certain income level, or who have a certain dialect, or who um, choose certain partners, whatever it may be. We all have some biases, and they shape the way that we see people or don't see them. And so it's important for us to be able to strengthen our compassion by recognizing that we need to check ourselves, that we need to be more aware of the messages that we're cultivating within ourselves, particularly those that may not be accurate, in order for us to be able to strengthen our desire to have that action word of compassion. We can't be compassionate with other people if we're not compassionate with ourselves. Self compassion can be really tough too. Some of us have a lot easier time being compassionate with other people because we feel as if they deserve it. We feel as if they're worthy. We've been taught that it is greater to sacrifice for others than it is to attend to yourself. We've been taught sometimes that attending to ourselves is selfish, and that it is arrogance, and that we need to be knocked down a peg, right? And so sometimes because of that, we internalize negative things about ourselves. We focus on our imperfections. And we see ourselves as unworthy and less than, and we have this shame, all of these things that build up and stop us from even being able to see ourselves. And so it's very important that we recognize that I have to first love me. And that loving me doesn't mean I have to be perfect to love me. And loving me doesn't mean I have to have it all together and make all the right decisions all the times. But loving me does mean that I love myself for who I am and where I am in this journey, right? That's the self compassion piece, is that I'm in this journey right now for a reason. And it's important for me to understand why I'm in this journey and why I've utilized the strategies that I have up to this point. And they have been able to carry me and get me through some things. And if I need to make some adjustments, then I can get some resources to work on that. But while I'm in that journey of working on it, I still need to love myself, right? I think it's also important for us to, during this election season, as I was talking to a lot of my clients, I said sometimes we're so focused on trying to get our point across that we don't understand where someone else is coming from in their point. And so, one of the ways to kind of diffuse when we're in different positions on things is simply to listen for understanding. What is this person's perspective? Where did it come from? And again, I don't have to agree with it, I don't have to adopt it, but it may help me better understand them by understanding this perspective, especially if it seems inconsistent with how they present it in other ways. Like, this just seems so drastically different for you to have an opinion like this, when these other areas like doesn't match. So sometimes when we understand where a person is coming from, then we can fill that gap in like, oh, okay, that's where you're coming from with that. And again, doesn't mean it's going to change my mind, but I do get to understand you better. And it is in our understanding of each other that we're able to create these relationships. And you know, we talked about the importance of being able to walk in someone else's shoes and experience what they experience in order for you to have a different perspective and not live in this silo of, oh, this is life for you, but this isn't life for other people. And so that does require you to challenge yourself to go outside of what is normal for you and have other conversations with other people that have different backgrounds, that have different experiences with regard to how they grew up, their cultural norms and values, their economic status, their educational background, right? So it's important for us to be able to have a range of folks and no, not so you can be like, oh, I do have a friend of X characteristic. No, not for that purpose. But again, and this is the listening for understanding. So you'll be able to educate yourself about what is going on. And it also allows you to be able to recognize the needs of others, which is what compassion is about, and may give you a goal that you have toward addressing something that might be a gap in your area. I also will tell you that there are few things that'll beat out some good gratitude. Being able to practice what you're thankful for, to be able to see that no matter what you didn't do in a day, that you're thankful for what you were able to do, that you're thankful for a hope that showed up, you are thankful for a smile that someone extended when they didn't have to, that you are thankful that even though you're not where you want to be, you're not where you used to be, that you're thankful that even though you only have $5 in your account, is not overdrawn, and so you don't have to pay extra money because you got overdrafts coming in. Like, hey, I balanced it down to the penny, and so be thankful for that, right? And so I think sometimes because life is tough, it can be really, really hard to remember what we're grateful for. But practicing those daily gratitudes is one of the best ways to grow compassion for others, but also for yourself. So, again, thank you, Hope, for showing some compassion to a stranger this morning. And I sincerely hope that you're paying it forward because that is what people have done for you throughout your life is showing you compassion. And so I'm going to pay it forward and encourage you all to be compassionate to yourselves, to other people, these journeys that we're on. We're all just trying to figure it out, broken pieces of glass trying to hold ourselves together. So in addition to being well, work on being compassionate.